Okay. There we go. So welcome everyone. I'm Alison from the Postgraduate Association. And here we are again with another interesting financial workshop with McLardy. This time on financial independence, which I think is quite important to all of us, no matter what stage of life you're in. And we've got a series of more financial workshops coming later in the month too, Liz, haven't we?
We have, yes. We've got the financial wellbeing 3-part series. I don't know if there's an echo for everybody else. Can anyone else hear that?
There is a bit.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll just be mindful. Yes, we've got at the end of the month, we're beginning the 3-part series again, which is taking students through really starting out. And it doesn't matter again what stage you're at in terms of age or financial situation, but it just helps you to have a bit of a structure in terms of looking at, okay, where am I financially, setting some goals and really giving you some tools to work through financial decisions that you might be looking at.
So keep an eye out for those. I'll be promoting those soon. So thanks for joining, and over to you, Liz.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Lovely. And thanks, Matthew and Isabel, for joining today. It's lovely to have you both back again, and I've worked with you individually too, so really nice to have you both here. So yes, today, and obviously those people who are listening back, hello to you as well. And again, apologies if you haven't been able to make it live due to the bit of a mishap with the links, but I hope that you get a lot out of the recording, and obviously you can be in contact with me if you need anything or have questions. So today's topic is financial independence, and I purposely named it that because we're going to cover a couple of different things, and I'm first going to give you the opportunity to sort of let me know what you think financial independence is. It's quite a buzzword in the sort of personal finance world. So I want to sort of dig into it, and it's also going to allow us to talk about some sort of longer term financial planning and thoughts around our finances in the long term. A lot of our sessions that we've done so far throughout the year have been quite short term focused. We've looked at some key topics like tax or debt management, even shorter term goals. We've really focused on the sort of the 12 months. What can we do in the next 12 months? But here I'd like to sort of bring a broader sort of point of view and perspective, and allow us to probably attend to some of those thoughts that we all have too, that take us to the long term, and what if, and am I going to be okay? What is my future going to look like? So I'm going to give you, I guess, some tools that you can use. I've got one at the end, hopefully that won't scare you off too much, but it is in Excel and it does have a lot of figures in it. But it's also something that I can work with you one-on-one as well, if that's something that you would like to do. So again, before I start, just like to make sure everyone knows that these are for educational purposes. So what I'm doing is trying to bring you information to make sure that you're informed and around all sorts of financial topics. And this is a new one, to make sure that you're not taking what I say as personal financial advice. That's not what the purpose of these sessions are. It's really to inform and educate you so you can make your own decisions. And again, it is around personal finance, and we are recording the session, so just be mindful about being okay about what you're sharing and talking about in this forum and space. And of course, if there are things that you'd like to go deeper in, that we do have the free sessions one-on-one with me, you have access to those. So certainly if there's something we go through and you want to get into in more detail, but don't feel this is the space to talk about it, that you know that you can get in contact with myself or Alison. So that's also available to everybody and those who are listening back as well. Lovely. Okay, so always like to just do a little bit of a snapshot. It's always just interesting to know. So obviously when we send out these invitations to everyone who has access to these webinars, it's nice to know who signs up and who's interested. So today we had, it was interesting. And in contrast to last one, we had quite a mix of people, but we've really got students from health and business, law and arts here today. And I think both of you are actually representative of each of these. So Isabel, I think you're in the health faculty, and Matthew, you're in business. Is that right, Isabel? Are you trying to, you're on mute.
Sorry, I've got someone at the door, Liz, at this second, so I need to go to the door. I'll be right back.
Of course, no problem at all. That's all right. We'll continue, and you just come in and out as you're comfortable. That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, lovely. Lovely. Yeah, so and of course, welcome to everybody as well. I always like to acknowledge, which is just such a privileged position that I'm in as well, to be able to connect in with so many different students from so many different backgrounds, studying so many different things. It's just incredible, and all the skills that you've gained already are really useful for when you're looking at your personal finances as well. So just really like to always emphasize that. A little high level about me. So I work, I'm actually currently working at Swinburne University, teaching there. I also run my own business, which is really what I'm here today in the capacity of, which is all around financial education and literacy. Predominantly focus on helping women in that space, as there's a great need, but I do provide financial coaching in my own capacity, in my own business. Alongside teaching accounting. So I was accounting lecturer here at Southern Cross as well, and have 15 years experience really working as a CPA in corporate, helping businesses with their money, making decisions about how to use their money to achieve strategic goals. And I guess I got to a stage where I wanted to help people and individuals with those same skills and tools that I'd learned from businesses to try and apply them to people's personal lives and really help that way. So that's a little bit about me, and the key sort of aim with these workshops is always about really trying to bring information to you to make you feel more confident and competent financially, so that you can then focus on your studies and your career and the things that you really love and the people you love, because I know that money can be such a drain for people, and often it's just that bridging that gap between of education, really, of understanding, and a lot of it you actually have yourselves, and reminding you of the skills and the tools that you do know, and helping you to work through and have that. So I hope today will also supplement and bring you some more confidence as well in this area. Okay, so today we're talking about financial independence, and I wanted to start off with getting a little bit of an idea, Matt, I know you're the only one that's here, what people's idea or understanding of what the term financial independence might mean, and what it even means to you. So there's not really, there's no wrong or right here, but just interested to hear, when you hear that term, what does it mean for you? Alison, did you want to share here as well? You've put your microphone back on.
Yeah, Matthew can go first. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Financial independence means having enough money to survive and thrive.
Yeah.
From the inside out. Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. And would that be where? And is that in terms of how you would work, what kind of job you would do? How would that having enough money be fulfilled in your sort of thinking?
I guess it would. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about some of these little bits and pieces before, but the idea of having like a little bit of a money buffer, having dependable, constant streams of income.
Yeah.
Having money, like the capacity or chance to make money, like literally while you're sleeping, so investments and that kind of thing. So I mean, there's a lot to it, but I guess in a nutshell, financial independence to me is being able to just kind of go with the apple cart, which is like that overarching structure of capitalism. That's kind of how we trade, communicate, and exchange resources in the world. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Fabulous. And that's really fabulous. So, Alison, what would like to contribute?
I guess to go with independence. The opposite to independence is dependence.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, not to be dependent on Centrelink, borrowing money from my parents, or partners or whatever, have that independence where I don't have to rely on others. I can rely on myself. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Fabulous. That's wonderful. That's another key aspect to it. Isabel, you just jumped into, but what I wanted to start off with was just hearing from you, just to get an idea of when you hear the word financial independence, what it means to you.
Yeah, well, pretty similar to what Alison just mentioned is now being dependent on other people. And for me, it's also not being dependent on a job, you know, like, yeah, just like, yeah, like if you're depending on getting a job and being employed by an employer, for me is being able to do that on my own.
Yeah.
So creating that possibility for me instead of depending on other people to pay me my salary.
Yeah, fabulous. Okay. Yes, and I really like picking up on that dependence and pulling that apart and realizing that it's not just about that dependent relationship with work, which it definitely is key to financial independence, but it's also really important to understand it when there's a dynamic between you and your partner as well. And how dependent you feel on that person or somebody else in your life, if it's a parent or a grandparent or something like that. So really achieving a state where you feel that you're independent of others in terms of being able to look after and provide for yourself in your lifestyle. And obviously it's the financial part of that. How do you get to that? So what I've done is just sort of pre-prepared a couple of images that might have sparked for people. So, and also pulled in some definitions here. So having assets that produce income to cover your day-to-day living. So that would be one of the definitions of financial independence. So it's similar to Matt, what you were saying. So that passive income, so that income that you're getting while you sleep. So being able to have a situation or scenario where you have assets that are actually delivering income where you're not having to work and be reliant on an employee-employer relationship. And that's what is often included in this financial independence idea. The idea of being able to choose your day, what you do. The picture here that I pulled in as well, I wanted to contrast ages as well, because I wanted to, instead of calling this webinar a retirement planning webinar, although some of the considerations are somewhat similar, what we have now, which has been probably in the last 10 to 15 years, is really a movement where younger people are not expecting or, I guess, buying into the idea that you have to work in that strict arrangement. And it's only until retirement that you would start thinking about some of the topics and things that we're going to talk about today. So yes, it's a consideration from when you are older. And typically that's when we've had these kind of conversations, is you're thinking about, okay, how much money do I need when I'm not going to work, when I'm not able to work anymore? You know, how am I going to provide for myself? And that was always, you know, when we're thinking of somebody who's in their 60s, for example, when they get to retirement age. But this is now something that's wonderfully happening and bubbling amongst younger people as well. And there's certainly a movement, which we'll talk more about as well, the FIRE movement, where there's a lot of younger people who are building up assets to produce income so that they can essentially retire in their 30s or 40s. And the way in which they live is different to how we've traditionally seen, how we've probably seen our parents live. So, and I guess what I want to be really careful with when I'm going through this topic today is bringing you information and ideas, but at the end I want to really try and ground it so you don't feel lost in it, that, oh, there's all these possibilities and options and what do I do with all of this? And that's when I'm going to bring in the tool that might be able to help you to then start systematically thinking through, and I'll give you some sort of tangible actions that you can take to start shaping your longer term thinking about where you might be, what you might be doing, and the financial aspect of that. So yes, so we've got the, you know, not being dependent on someone else to manage your money decisions. So part of that is employment, part of that is in relationships as well. So another key aspect, you know, the idea here of just being able to travel, not having to do a job that you don't like. So being in a position where you have those assets that are producing an income that give you that flexibility and space. And I know as we talk through this too, it all just sounds so wonderful. And for some people, depending on where you are, stage, age, financial situation, may feel really unrealistic. But what I hope that we can do is, you know, shape it. So obviously everyone's situations are going to be different. But it's just having the thoughts and activating these ideas and possibilities is really important. So it's being able to And as I said, as I'm starting these webinars, is feeling confident and competent financially too. And that's going to be really crucial to having financial independence. You need to have financial skills to get to that stage, but also to be manage yourself from that stage on as well and look after yourself. So I guess definitionally, as we see here, beautiful Wikipedia, is going to define it as saying, okay, financial independence is all about the state of having sufficient personal wealth to live without having to work actively for basic necessities. So one of the key pieces here for me is that basic necessities. So we've got to think when we're talking about financial independence, that it's just covering your day-to-day living. You've got to understand everyone has different lifestyles, different expectations about what they do, and there's obviously different costs associated with those. But this idea of financial independence is meaning that it would just cover, that you know that you're going to be able to buy food, petrol, whatever your housing situation is, that those basic necessities would be covered, and that's kind of the definition of financial independence. So yes, you need to have assets that then generate that amount of money, whatever that amount is for you, to cover all of those expenses. And as I said earlier, it's often linked in with this idea. Has everyone heard of FIRE? Not heard of it before? No? So FIRE is a acronym for Financial Independence Retire Early. So if you go Googling on that, you'll find all sorts of people all over the world. And this is the movement that's become such a strong one. But the key here is if you're thinking about yourself and your situation right now, and you're thinking, well, how do I get to a stage where I have enough assets that on a yearly basis are going to generate maybe $50,000 or $60,000 a year to cover my expenses? How much is that going to be? And we're going to look at that on the next slide. But the way that people are doing that is by extreme saving. So they're working for a short period of time and they're saving the majority of what they earn to build up to that asset base so that they can then live off it. And that's what we've got here. So, and I guess I don't feel like the terms are really that important. So if we're talking about FI or financial independence or FIRE, you can get caught up and people be like, oh, are you into the FIRE movement? Or you might hear it, people talking about it. But all we're really trying to think about is what would be the figure that you would need to get to so that you could, with, again, assumptions around the returns that you would get on the various different types of assets that you might have. What is that figure? And how quickly can you get there, or how will you get there? That's the key thing. So this is really typical retirement planning thinking. So this was really about, we're going to work for our life, until we're 60. We're going to put money away every year and build that up to a figure. And then when you get to that figure, you can stop working, and then your investments would then deliver a return, some of which, depending on the amount that you got to, you might have to eat into that asset, into that capital. But I guess everyone's idea of financial independence, as we've just talked about in the beginning, is we don't want to depend on anybody. So part of that is also the government, as Alison shared too, is being able to be in a position where you've got your own assets that you can obviously continue to use to create income. You might have to eat into them a little bit, but you know that you'll live out your life without having to be a burden on society using government funds, or your children, or your parents, or your family, or your friends. And I guess that's the ultimate that we're all trying to achieve. But is the figure going to be the same for everyone? And that's my key question on the next slide, which is probably what we're all trying to start thinking about. Thinking, okay, so how does this work, and how much do I need? And what is this? Give me some tangibles. Welcome, Felicity. So the question is, how much money would you need to be financially independent? Any ideas? So I've got a couple of figures there. Interested to see what everyone's thoughts are in terms of, or what considerations they would need to make in terms of how do you make that decision? Yes,
so life expectancy.
Yes.
And then a rough estimation of when you plan to retire.
Yep.
and then the amount, and then it's just like a linear equation. So X would be the amount of money, and then you would divide it by the number of years you're hoping to be retired for in your life.
Yep.
And then
that's
let that equal, hang on.
Because then you're assuming you're making no return on your money. So that's if you were going really, really risk averse and you just want a big sum of money and you're going to divide it by, so say you think you're going to live for another 40 years, you spend $50,000 a year, then you're going to say $50,000 times 40, and I'm getting my calculator out.
Yep.
Yeah, so that could be one way that you might, and then how much is that?
40. That is 20.
$50,000.
Is that 2 million?
Times 40 years is $2 million. So this is all to start getting you thinking, and there's no right or wrong answer here, but I want to just hear what some of the other considerations that you think you might need to think about. So that's a really flat, nice, dirty way of doing it. You're going to say, okay, I'm going to spend $50,000 a year and I'm going to live for 40 years. So obviously we all adjust that depending on how old we are and what we think our outlook is. But what are some of the other considerations that you might want to make? So if we're going to live for 40 years and we spend $50,000 a year now, in 40 years' time, how much money are we going to need to cover our day-to-day expenses? So you're going to have to increase that amount as well. And all of these things that we're talking about, it might be starting to fizz in people's minds and feel like there's all these things we have to consider, but I'm going to bring it all together in a worksheet at the end of the session, so don't freak out too much. So that's one consideration, is we know that the time value of money. So money, then we've got CPI. So CPI is that figure that tells us that over time, we're going to need more to live the same amount. So $50,000 today might be the equivalent of $100,000 in 40 years' time. So we've got some equations we can do to incorporate that. So we know we need to factor in CPI, and we know also what we might want. So what might you do with that money? So instead of thinking, okay, I just need to get $2 million cash, I need to somehow get $2 million cash together, put it in the bank, and then I can retire. Then I can just live my life and know, okay, $50,000 a year, that's all I need to do. What else might happen to that $2 million? What else might you want to factor in? So if it's sitting in a bank, or what else might it be doing?
A few bank fees.
Well, some fees. Yep, you're thinking about all the costs, which is good, Matt. Yep. That's good. Costs, fees.
Oh, yeah.
But what else might be happening to that money? So if you've got that money invested somewhere, Alison?
It may attract interest.
Good.
Like increased.
Yeah. It's going to increase. Yeah, so we've got to make some assumptions around what are the returns are we getting for our assets. So that $2 million you might have, so maybe you've got 1 million of it is a paid off rental property, and you earn a return of 7% in terms of rent that you receive from somebody who's tenanting that property. So this is where it gets complicated. I know I'm just putting in different ideas out here. And this is, again, if you've got particular personal things, we can work through them. But this is what you would consider. So you would look at, okay, so where are those assets invested? Maybe you have them invested, maybe 50% of them are in your superannuation. And you want to look back and say, okay, on average, my superannuation has returned over the past 15 years, it's returned 5%. So you could use 5% as a reasonable average for an aspect of your assets and say, okay, that $1 million is going to return me 5% generally over, that 40-year period. So you can factor that in as well. So that's what's going to work in your favor. So you've got some things that are going to, your asset should still hopefully go up, but you might be drawing down on it at the same time. And this is when you want to model it so you can get an idea of, am I going to run out of money or not? That's one of the other key things that you're going to consider. And thanks, Felicity, too. So you're also looking at, what is the lifestyle you want to live? Are you wanting to go on holidays every year? What is your personal situation? Maybe you live here, but you've got family members overseas and you really need to factor in that you're going to have a holiday overseas every year to make sure you can visit your family. So absolutely, and that's what makes this really unique to every individual. The answer to this question, there is no one answer. Firstly, because you need to figure those things out yourself, and start planning and modeling, not to the finest of detail, because obviously life twists and turns, but to get an idea, at least think about the long term. What might it be like? I'm thinking at this stage, this is how I could imagine things going, and then you can work back from there. So good. So there isn't really a final answer here. And that's, I guess, a little bit of an illustration of that. Well, one point to make as well, when I was bringing up the financial independence, we were talking about that in the previous slide. If you do go and research financial independence, and you'll see all sorts of different people and the fire industry, they will say that your fire or your FI number, which I've got here on that first point, the number that you should be aiming for is 25 times your annual expenses. So if you know how much you spend on a yearly basis, if it's $50,000, $100,000, whatever it is, so it's really important again for you to know. So don't take a figure that someone else tells you. Don't say, oh, you've got to get to $3 million or $1 million will do you, because they don't know your circumstances or how you live your life. So you must understand yourself and how you live and what your budget is. So if you've got a really good idea of what your baseline expenses are on any given year, what they would say is that you would take that figure and multiply it by 25. And that's the figure that you're trying to aim towards. So you can keep that in your head and do that calculation. But I would really encourage you to then pull it apart. This is my accounting analyst details, is then to challenge it and see, would that work for me? Would that figure be the right figure for me? And then you'll get yourself clearer and closer to what is the longer term goal that I'm aiming for. So for example here, and I'm sorry it slips across to 2 lines, but the example would be, so say you had a baseline of $50,000 was your annual expenses, you would be multiplying that by 25, and that the fire people would say, well, you need to build up assets of $1.25 million. Once you get to that stage and you've invested them, you should be able to get an average return of probably 5%, and they would say, well, that will produce you $50,000 a year, and that's all that you need to then look after yourself and not be a burden. So, but again, really important to think through what is your baseline expenses. So lifestyle, you know, are you looking after others as well? And in your mind, do you have parents that you need to care for, children you need to care for, other extended family in terms of that as well? What are the, you know, your requirements of what you would like to do? Also considering we're thinking long term, and we're looking after ourselves, not being a burden. But also at that end stage, we've also got to think, is there any idea of legacy that you'd like to leave behind? So if you do have children or grandchildren or things, if it's possible, and this is where you start to think about these things and see and challenge and work out, is it possible that I could leave a legacy? And the modelling will help you to get there. So obviously that's probably a scenario above what we're all trying to achieve. If you can achieve a situation where you completely provide for yourself, you've not had to use government funding or any, you know, resources from family members, that would probably be everybody's, you know, first prize. Not possible for everybody, and that's also really good to be aware of too. If you're really early on, you're young and you're early on in your career, doing some of this modelling can be really helpful too, because it can help you get an idea of the direction that you're heading, and maybe some of the decisions you're making now will be really instrumental to making sure that that is the path that you can have, as opposed to relying on government funds, which again is not bad, but if it's not the goal that you're achieving, it's thinking about, well, what can I do with the resources I have to try and get to where I want to be. So how do we do this? Which is the critical thing. So how do you achieve that? So the key thing to think about and start with, which is really what we're doing here, quite different to what we've looked at before, in terms of very different to looking at, you know, just a short 12-month goal where you're just saying, okay, in the next 12 months, I want to be able to buy a car or pay off X amount of my house. This is starting with your end in mind, which can be challenging for people as well. And in the end, I'm talking about the end of your life. Not just the point at which you retire, but we need to start at that end point and say, what position would I be in? And you need to work back from there. So with that end in mind, you're then working back from there, which is obviously, as Matt was saying, trying to get some idea of how long we will live, and then thinking through how much money I would then use or need year on year leading up to that to look after myself. So with that long term, you know, kind of giving it a little bit more shape and understanding what you would be doing, how you would be living, what the expenses would be, you then come back to where am I right now? And then you've kind of got this gap. So it's like, this is where I am, this is where I'm going to be. How much money do I need in order to make sure I can fund that? And as I shared before, one of the key, I guess, again, an approach to this FIRE movement is, you know, if you're trying to save up, if you've maybe got quite a small bank balance to begin with and you're trying to get to a big figure, it can be really overwhelming and you just feel limited in what you can do. One of the things that I guess that people have done, which is again non-traditional to what we've seen, but has really challenged the way people are living, and I guess that's what I'm hoping with this workshop too, is getting you to sort of think about and challenge the way that we do live, and keeping in mind what is it that you want and you want to achieve, so you're making the decisions to align with that. So here we've got people who are doing radical things like saving 70% of their income, and working out ways to do that, you know, in their 20s, young, you know, and that's incredible, being able to do that. So to work up for 10 years perhaps of their life, saving 70% of an income to get to a point in their 30s, mid 30s, and then having, you know, the $2 or $3 million that they can then live off for the rest of their life. And that's part of what this approach is. Yes, Alison said, absolutely. To the point where if you were just even looking at your own personal budget, looking at how that would even be possible, because these people aren't on massive salaries either, so they're really finding ways to live very, very simply. But something to I guess activate maybe in all of us, ways to consider, you know, are there things that you could do differently in your budget if that's what you're trying to achieve? But that's one option, obviously. But I guess with this is it's trying to help you, I guess, understand and think through some of those longer term questions that you might have and structure them, and think about also what suits you and what is reasonable. So for you, if that's what it takes to get to this point, you've got to save 70% of your annual income, that just may not be possible. That's just something that you decide yourself, well, that's not going to be possible, and what can I do instead? What is possible for me, and what position does that get me into? And then are there, you know, allowances or adjustments I might need to make about the expectation of what I think some of my life experiences are going to be? You know, maybe it's then going on the overseas holiday every second year, or, you know, making those personal adjustments. So I guess it's the process is, yeah, thinking about what is that number that you're trying to get to, and challenging it, looking into it in detail, being able to understand, you know, have a good understanding of how much your lifestyle costs you, and yes, having buffers and amounts of money that you can draw upon as well in emergencies, getting clear understanding of what that is, thinking about how you can get to that figure, and using your creative minds. We've got so many options in terms of working arrangements, investments, because what you need to look at is investments to get you to the figure, but then also investments that will serve you to pay you income as well. So looking at what are some of those options. And obviously we're looking at things like dividends, rent from investment properties, as I've shared, interest on money in the bank, and considering what are the returns that you're likely to get from all of those different types of assets. And as we've sort of talked about before in terms of investments, making sure that we have, you know, diversity in those investments too, to make sure that that's a safe way of doing it. But I know from some of you that you've got, you know, even businesses that you're wanting to run and build up, things that you could step away from as you get older as well, but that can still allow you to produce income. Those things are also really good to look at. So I wanted to also just bring up this sort of visual infographic here, just to give you an idea of, you know, some of these concepts around financial independence and freedom, and people will talk about all sorts of bits and pieces, and just to be aware of how they sort of build on each other. And the first is this idea of financial security. So, you know, having the passive income to cover your basic living expenses, which is really more what we were saying in terms of financial independence, but they're sort of calling that financial security. Then getting to a stage where you've got enough income to cover your lifestyle. So when we're talking about lifestyle things, they're kind of the additional things on top of those necessities that you don't have to have, but that you enjoy, and they do, you know, enhance your life. And again, they're all really personal. And then getting to this stage of financial freedom where it can cover your ideal or dream lifestyle, where you would have much more money and options as well. So it's kind of a pathway. So that's the key things that I'd be encouraging to, and which we've kind of talked a bit about already in terms of the things you would consider, is, and I don't want to, I guess, bring you this idea, which I'm sure many of you have thought about before, even just, you know, daydreaming about winning the lotto or having so much money. Even having a conversation like this can bring up that idea too of, oh, is this even possible? And I guess I want to make sure that I can give you hope and an excitement for the future and your financial future, whatever shape that takes, but really to make sure that you've got the information and tools to take control of it, to be informed and to be empowered by that. And it may be different. So this idea of financial independence is not something that you can achieve overnight, but I really think it's in terms of having a longer term goal, it's a really important goal to have, because it's going to motivate you and change some of your behaviors and considerations about how you use your money, and you'll feel a lot of sense of accomplishment out of just doing that. Even if you don't get to that point of financial independence at maybe an age that's earlier than retirement, or you don't even achieve it at all, the process of working towards it and having it as a goal, the experience of going through that will be well worth it. So just really important to think that through as well, that it's not just, it's one of those destination and journey quote things, but it's not just the destination, it's the journey. It's having that longer term goal and giving that longer term goal really clear by giving it a figure. So once you've worked it out and got an idea of what that figure is, you've given yourself a really clear, specific longer term goal that you're trying to achieve, as opposed to maybe at the beginning of this webinar, you may have not even thought about it, not had an idea of how you would even come up with that idea, because otherwise you could be just living your life constantly thinking, am I doing enough? Am I going to be okay? Have I got enough, or will I not have enough? You'll be able to work that through. And I'm going to show you the tool in a minute, although I've been overselling my tool. So the key thing is, yes, to consistently, you know, try and increase your income generating assets. And the key one for everybody, I would imagine, who's working is going to be your superannuation. That's you know, the key income that will produce an income when you retire, but any other investments like that as well. And I guess that, yes, so this idea of it might seem like an impossibility, but just prompting you to consider new ways of living or activate those ideas, you know, considering you to live in a different way, use your money in a different way, think about investments in a different way. And the key, I guess, with all of this as well, is making sure that you continue to keep yourself educated and informed. And when you're making decisions about which financial assets you're going to go into, which ones you feel like are going to be right for you, that you're taking the time to invest in your own education and understanding, and not be trying to pick up, you know, something that's going to make you rich overnight. And that process of educating yourself, becoming informed, creating your own model and structure and thinking, and maybe speaking to somebody like me or other people can help you to then improve your financial planning. And it's going to be your self-directed financial planning that you could take to a financial planner and get so much more out of those processes. So what a financial planner would do, and I guess when we're talking about financial independence, which I said right at the beginning, essentially it's retirement. It's trying to work out when can I retire, you know, if at an earlier age, and it's saying what is that figure. So what I want to, before I get to that, I'm going to just share. Does anybody have any questions, by the way, before I just share my Excel spreadsheet? Because I know I've been just blabbing. How's everybody feeling about what we've just talked through? Is it a bit overwhelming?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little bit overwhelming. This is brilliant information, just jotting notes and kind of appreciating the value in having the hope of the long term, and that these skills can be developed. That's kind of like the key message that does give me hope that I can improve. I guess what you sometimes talk about in terms of the share market, that emotionality kind of creeps in, that kind of sense of like, will I be okay? So like, just for me, like I mean, my income streams are usually from the school terms, and so in the school holidays, for example, I don't have that buffer anymore, and then I have to go and kind of outsource to my immediate network.
Yeah.
So then that really throws a spanner in the works, and it and I guess it's just this this would be stuff for a personal counselling session, but in a nutshell,
it's a
just
good
kind
example
of this,
though, because so what you're sharing, so and it's good to think about people's different work scenarios, and if you're early in a career too, looking at how can I shape some of what I'm doing so that it can become passive income. And so, for example, so Matthew does a lot of teaching and tutoring, and the thing that just jumped into my mind just then was potentially shaping some of it into online courses that people could go through, and that they could then buy, that you could refer your current client base to. So outside of that, you know, within the term teaching, somebody could engage with those. It could even give you access to an international market where you can't see that person locally here in Australia, but where the terms match up and someone's actually in the depths of schooling over in the UK, they might actually engage with some of the tutoring and work that you're providing online. So just thinking, opening up to some of those other ideas around and possibilities about what is it that I do, because that's definitely a common reaction. People will feel like they're really limited in what they do. They don't have many options. The share market understandably makes people feel anxious. And I would again have probably a personal conversation with people about the share market, but it's looking at what are the particular, you know, where are you at in your age and stage? What are particular shares that you can look at? And there are definitely things that you can do, definitely for the long term. When you're young, like you, Matt, you can have things invested for a long time that you don't need to be worried and look at, you know, like indexes, for example. You know, you'll hear a lot about Warren Buffett talking about an index that you invest in. So over a long term, it's not that you're buying and selling constantly, but over a long term, the returns that you'll get if you put money in there regularly, reinvest the dividends, that will grow. So there's things that you can do in the background as well, alongside what you are doing for work. One of the key things that when I read about financial independence as well, and this idea of us all then, like these young guys, seem to be young guys in America doing the FIRE movement, then, you know, saying, no, I'm not going to have a job anymore. made me feel insecure and unsettled too, because I think what I actually wanted was a job that I really liked. I don't want to retire. I don't want to leave. I don't want to just be on the peripheral of society and just, that was my own personal reaction. I thought, oh, okay, here's an idea, and everybody's racing after this idea of wanting to exit life. But it's actually about finding and shaping the work that you do so you can love it and you can keep doing it and keep that as a core part of you and contributing to society. And then, yes, there's decisions about what you can do with your investments and things like that to help them grow and steward that money, you know, like you would a good garden. But it's the big piece was around finding that work. And I know, Isabel, this speaks to what you're doing as well, because you're quite an inspiration in this space, in the work that you're creating and the businesses that you're building at a later stage in life too. So it's amazing. So that's also what I would like people to think about and take away too, to make sure that you can keep working, doing and contributing in different ways that fits in with your lifestyle still. So yeah, I think there's still heaps of possibilities, Matt, for your work as well, and making up for some of those gaps. And a lot of people do have that lumpy, non-consistent income, and that's a real challenge. But certainly with a bit of creativity and trying to step back from that place of fear, we can all try and make these decisions out of fear and feel like, oh my goodness, I'm scrambling. We all feel like rats in a bowl, just kind of calm it down. And then from there, look at, okay, what are my options? We've got so many in the current ways that we work and live, and everybody can find work that they can do, that they can enjoy, and that can provide for them financially. So that's probably, it's kind of an anti-fire in a way that but I think, yeah, work is really important too. So what I wanted to share in terms of, and I did warn everybody about this spreadsheet, but I wanted to bring it up because it's really for a couple of reasons. I wanted to give you a tool that you could go and play around with. And what I'll do is I'll send this to Alison and she can send it out to everyone so you can have a play around with it. This is just an example, but of a way that you could structure. And this is just one way. This is just what I've come up with from working with financial planners. I've seen what they do and what they do behind the scenes. This is what they do behind the scenes. They will present you with a graph about what your income will look like over a period of time, but they won't give you the stuff in the background. And I wanted to know the stuff in the background. I want to know what are the assumptions you're making, because I'm not sure I'm comfortable with those. So I want you to be in charge of your modelling. And for you, if you don't know what the CPI is, go and research it. Does 2.5 seem right? What does that person think? What does this person think? And for you to come up with your own assumptions. I'm really wanting to give you this tool, because what you would usually get is just a beautiful graph, which is really nice and easy to understand. But this is the detail behind those financial planning graphs for any sort of longer term. So I'll talk through it just at a high level. But of course, everybody here and listening back, if you have questions, know that you can book in time with me. We can work through it together. So I was just making sure I was up to date with all of the chat stuff as well. So essentially, what we're doing in this spreadsheet is trying to, and you can obviously adjust it for any time period. I've just done 20 years, looking at 20 years, and you can change the dates. But essentially what it's doing, it's different from what we've done in the past, where we've looked at a budget for 12 months and we've looked quite detailed into, okay, what money coming in, what's going out over that 12-month period. But here what we're doing, stepping back a bit higher level, saying what's going to be happening from year to year. And we're talking about big kind of money decisions that you can see coming up for you over the next 20 years. And it's just for you to play around with. You might not know, things are going to change, but it gives you something to work with. So what you would begin with, and we've got here year 2020, you would start off with, okay, what is, and if you've done the financial wellbeing webinars with me before, you would have created your own personal balance sheet. And that's essentially what you're doing here. You're saying, what is my financial situation? So if you're going to start this, go away and do this today, you would log into your internet banking, you'd log into your superannuation accounts, you'd look at, okay, what's my property value? What do I own on it? What do I owe on it? This is your net assets. And this is your financial position here, so estimated financial position. So they say that's what it is, it's 65,000. So you might have $20,000 in a cash just bank account, you might have $40,000 in super, and maybe you've got $5,000 in shares. So if this is different for you, add in columns so it reflects your financial situation. All I've added here at the top, all these percentages mean, is they actually show what percentage of your money is in each of those three categories. And I won't go into that into detail, but that can also help you when you're looking at diversification and investment decisions. But all that's saying is, okay, 30% of my wealth is in cash, 62 is in super, and I've got 8% of it in shares. So that's where I'm starting out. And then you would say, okay, in a given year, so say we go through 2020, we're going to get some growth in these assets. So, and I've made some assumptions. So high interest savings, 0.8%. But again, all of these things that I've got here are really there for you to look into and challenge and think about, what is this the right assumption to be making. So in a given year, you'd also know what your income is. So look back at your, you know on an annual basis, having done that sort of high-level budgeting process, what your income is and what your living expenses are. And if you have other things, other outside of those living expenses, other things like a holiday, or maybe you have some money you're putting aside to invest in a business, maybe you're purchasing a car or a house, whatever those things are, you can include them at a high level. So what this then shows you then so at the beginning of 2020, you had 65,000. And then at the end, you have 122,000. Yeah. So I think I've got some strange assumptions in here. So that's probably why some of this is working out. Anyway, so what you need to look at is doing that, working that through each year for the next whatever period is that you're looking at. So you can sort of get an idea, and that allows you to start modeling what year to year, high level, is my financial situation going to look like. One of the scenarios, and you might even do different tabs, so you might have different scenarios. You might, what if my scenario didn't change and I just keep doing what I'm doing now for the next 20 years? What is my financial situation going to be like? And you would model that, and you would come down, and it would allow you to arrive at a figure at the end of that 20 years. It could also allow you to look at, if you're at a different stage, maybe could I retire in 10 years? So you would do your modeling for the next 10 years and have a look at, okay, how much do I have at the end of that 10 years? So this is year 10, the end of year 10. And obviously these figures are all examples only. And then you would say, obviously, this is a pretty sad situation if you've got no money left. But hopefully, if this is a point of retirement, you could get to that you say, okay, if that's my point of retirement, then you would adjust this next year to have, you wouldn't have that same level of income that you've been experiencing before in the salary job. Maybe that's then all you're then going to remove that, and all you're going to then see is the returns on the money that you have invested. And you're going to see what happens if I take out that income. Am I going to be able to continue to provide for myself for the next 10 years? If that makes sense. Yeah. And you're obviously going to add in, depending on the different types of investments or assets you have, what are the likely returns that you're getting on those? So, so I can see, Isabel, you've got asking, is there an ideal percentage around growth? So over the longer term, so you'll see here, I've got 0.8 there because we had such low returns on our high interest accounts over the past couple of years. They have gone up a little bit now. So really important for you to include, if you've got money in that, the actual, what are you currently getting? But then you're going to need to make some sort of a judgment around what return could you get on that over. It depends on how long. So if you're looking at modelling it for, say, for this period of 20 years, having a superannuation return or a longer term investment return of 5% is pretty conservative, but probably accurate. So if you look at that longer term, you'll have years where it will go down, other years where it will go up. But on the average, a 5% return is probably a pretty, and one that's often used in financial planning by financial planners. But again, for you to actually investigate for yourself. You might have your own share portfolio, though, that you've had maybe much higher returns on. Maybe you invest yourself and you've, over the past 10 years, you've been returning maybe 10, 12%. So you're going to put in an average of 8. But this is where you can actually play around with it too and get, it's a little bit of allows you to sort of work through concerns as well that you might have. So again, having another tab for, you might have 3 tabs that might be a most likely, worst case scenario and a best case scenario. So in your mind, if you wake up in the middle of the night and like, oh my gosh, what if everything crashes and I don't get a return on anything? Well, you can model that. You can use this to model that and say, what would happen? What would I do? It gives some action to take and tangibility to some of those financial concerns and allows you to structure them and at least give meat to them as opposed to them just floating around and giving you so much stress. So that's really what you can use this for. If you have your own business, obviously you can include that in here as well, and you would just be including the income from that business. And I would encourage you to have probably a net income there just to make it easier, because you want this to be really simple, because it's that high level, just stepping through year to year. And as you can see here, so you might be that you model holidays at particular times. You might want to add in your age as well, so you know, okay, I've got an important birthday coming up, I'm going to do something special, so I'll add in a $20,000 holiday there. Or I'm going to buy a house in 5 years' time, I'm going to have a $200,000 deposit. And this isn't so much about how do I get there yet, but it's modeling, what does it look like? Like, is this possible? And that's really the key value of it. So looking at this spreadsheet, how is everyone doing? Does everyone feel like it's something that they could use? How confident do you feel that you could, if you have access to this, that you could actually input some of your own figures and allow it to sort of help you to structure some of your thinking longer term? So Felicity says yes. Yeah, Matt's saying, yeah, all good. Okay, cool. Alison?
Yeah, I could use it. I just think some of your figures are very high.
Which ones? The percentages?
Well, income, holidays.
Yeah, it's an absolute example, absolutely. And
I guess it's all relative. If you're on a lower income, then hopefully you've got lesser living expenses, and I wouldn't certainly spend $20,000 on a holiday. That's all.
No, absolutely not. Yes, absolutely. So, and that's on purpose, because it will trigger that for people, and they'll go, no, that's not right. That's not my situation. Hopefully not in a negative way that makes you feel like, oh, I can't have a $20,000 holiday. But that's not what it's there for. It's for you to say, what is the expectation for me, like the realistic expectation for how I'm going to be living my life over the next 10 to 20 years, and for you to hopefully not just look at it and go, oh yeah, that's good enough, that looks like my life. That it's going to make you go, no, that's wrong, I'm going to change that. I only earn this amount, I've got this in my living expenses. Because what it will do, again, all of this, my whole backbone of what I do and what I did for corporates is all about information. So if you've got the information about what is happening for you with your finances, you are going to make better informed decisions. At first, you might go, oh, that's not looking so good. Okay, it's not looking so good. I need to do something different, because if I want to get to a different point, I have this information right now, which is better than having it in a year's time or 10 years' time. I can actually do something about it now. What can I do now to change that? And it will help you to make and change and shape your own financial situation. And the best thing is always to know yourself, know your own situation, and not to be comparing it to anybody else's. That you look at, what are the resources I have that I'm stewarding, I'm looking after, how can I care for them and care for myself? And that's what this is really going to help. Yeah, knowledge is power. Absolutely, Isabel. Yeah, perfect. So yes, I'm glad. See some of those figures and go, no, that's not my life. And you use it to shape and allow it to illustrate what yours is looking like. And then allow it to help you to inform decisions and seek additional help if it is a financial planner that you go to. If you have a superannuation account, often there's free services. But having this information with you and at your fingertips for those kind of conversations, if it's, you know, for other reasons, if it's for business planning, whatever it might be, is certainly going to help you. So you can actually ask them, if they do modelling for you, you can ask them what are their assumptions that they're using in terms of CPI, what are they assuming in terms of the returns that you're getting in your super. You go into your super account and have a look back historically, what have the average returns been? Because you want to feel confident. You don't want someone just to give you a plan and just say, here, you know, you're fine, just keep doing what you're doing, it's all good. That's not going to make you feel better. You need to know what are the assumptions they're making, so you can be empowered and feel in control. Because if you wake up at night worried about it, you can go back to your own modelling and say, well, okay, maybe I do need to do a worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is X. If that's what, you know, what's on your mind. What happens if I do lose my job? Okay, let's look at that. I take out income for those years. What would I do? So it kind of gives you that structure to work with. Okay, so again, I've probably taken up a little bit extra more time for everybody, but I hope that it's been helpful. We've gone through so much, I know, from the high level conceptual, just thinking, what is financial independence? For you to activate, you to think and shape what your idea of financial independence is, and getting you to stretch out your thinking in terms of the long term, whatever that long term is, even if it's, you may only want to do this for 5 years or 10 years or really long, 40 years, but it allows you to have a bit of a structure. And I hope now that you're kind of clear on what are some of the key considerations you need to think about. But in saying that, they're also not that complicated. So it's knowing what your annual expenses are, what your lifestyle is, what your expectations are of what you would do and spend and that kind of thing. And then look at what are those, you know, the returns that you're going to be getting. And if you come at it from a different perspective and say, right, well, I need to get a 10% return on this, you know, this chunk of money, and that would really get me into a better position. You can then go, right, what can I do to get a 10% return? What assets are out there that give a 10% return? What are the risks involved? But what are they? And then you can start making a decision from that perspective. So just, yeah, lots to think about. But hopefully good to just get you, this is the key structure though that I hope that everyone can you know, move into if they've done the wellbeing workshops with me. And if you haven't, this is something that we'll add into them as well when we go through those workshops in the coming week, where we'll start off, and if you're not sure about what your income is or what your living expenses are, we go into that in detail. So Matt did that, joined in with the first round of that last year. So that's what we'll be starting off at the end of October and through November. And you'll get a really clear understanding of where you are financially, what money's coming in, what's going out, how to set short-term financial goals. And then this is really feeding from that, looking at what are some of the longer term impacts and planning arrangements that you can set up for yourself.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I might stop the recording.